Hey guys, this is Mike, the Detroit Borg, and today we're taking a look at a brand new Blackberry. So this is the KEYone. Now it looks like Blackberries we've known for quite a few years, but of course there's been a lot of updates and some impressive hardware design changes. Of course, Blackberry appeals to a core set of users who really enjoy the robustness, security, and the productivity of a Blackberry device, and we're going to go in depth and find out exactly what that means. So getting to the accessories, first thing we have on the top is a packet containing all of our paperwork. We also get a SIM ejection tool. The paperwork is pretty familiar, but it does highlight some of the unique attributes of this hardware design, and of course we're going to go in depth. In terms of the accessories, they're all very neatly arranged in the bottom of the box. First up is the USB power adapter, and since this is USB-C, we do have rapid charging built into this phone. We also get a USB Type-C cable. This is actually the first Blackberry device, I believe, with a USB Type-C connector. We also get a pretty decent set of in-ear headphones with an inline remote and microphone. Now, what really makes the design of the Blackberry KEYone unique, besides its keyboard, is its robust design. It feels heavy and is wrapped in this aluminum frame, which looks extra thick and durable. So this phone should be a lot more rugged than the glass-covered phones we're getting used to lately on more high-end smartphones. It's the type of phone that feels less delicate. In fact, if you drop it, you probably will dent your floor before you do any damage to this phone. Now, the rounded aluminum edges wraps around to the back of the phone, which is wrapped in this sort of rubbery material, which adds to the grip of the phone. Blackberries have had this for a long time, and that makes for a very comfortable handheld experience. It also provides some protection because it's less likely to scratch than an all aluminum or glass design, and of course, it's more shock resistant. Now, although the phone looks kind of retro, it actually has a lot of the specs and amenities of modern high-end flagship smartphones, including a very fast fingerprint sensor integrated into the spacebar. I think this is a smart design detail. The display here obviously is quite unique for BlackBerry because it's shorter than the common smartphone. This is 4.5 inches with a resolution of 1080 by 1620, so it's kind of a shorter 1080p display. This is an LCD IPS display with a pixel density of 433. Now, for the most part, it's a pretty good looking display, but it's much dimmer than I've come to expect out of LCD, and it's not as visible outdoors as I would like to see. In terms of using this display, 4.5 inches is smaller than most smartphones today, but it's still quite large. I really didn't feel cramped by this display in any way, unless you're using the side-by-side apps feature of Android 7. And for the most part, apps scaled just fine to this display, so I didn't really run into too many issues. Even games did just fine with this. Now, of course, this is an Android device, so we do have our navigation keys just above our keyboard. Now, these are backlit. They're not part of the screen. They're capacitive keys that are just off the edge of the screen. Of course, we have our full mechanical keyboard with lots of features built in, which we're going to explore when we get to the software tour, but these are glossy keyboards with capacitive sensors in them. So this keyboard basically acts like a trackpad, so you can swipe across to navigate through your interface, and of course we're going to go in depth and explore what you can do with that. So along the right side, just below our SIM tray, we'll find a volume rocker along with a convenience key just below it. That's where your thumb normally rests, while the power key is along the left side, which is a farther reach. Personally, I wish this was swapped around, but the convenience key is basically an assignable key. Now, this used to be between the volume controls on the previous design, so this is a little more conventional. Now, like most phones today, we have a combination nano SIM tray and a micro SD card slot just along the side. Now, toward the top of the phone, you can see that this is not a thin device, but I like this design overall. I like the chamfered edges and the rounded corners. We also have our headphone jack in the corner, which doesn't quite line up with the rounded edge, but it's pretty close. Toward the bottom edge, this is the first Blackberry device I've seen with a USB-C connector, which does support rapid charging. So when it comes to charging this device, we actually get options that pop up on the screen when you connect a cable. Also common to recent Blackberry devices is a charging indicator along the edge of the screen, which I think is a nice detail. Now, although it looks like a set of stereo speakers, it's not. We have a mono speaker along the right, which is very loud and clear. It's a good speaker, and then we have a microphone on the left side. So although it's not quite as loud as Blackberry devices have known to get, the speaker is still louder than the average mono speaker. Toward the top of the screen here, etched into the metal frame, is a very loud earpiece, so this is a great phone to use, which Blackberry is known for. We also have a really impressive 8-megapixel front-facing camera with an f2.2 aperture, which records 1080p HD video. We also get an RGB notification light, which is highly customizable through Blackberry Hub, and then we also get our proximity and light sensors. Checking out the camera along the back, the design is pretty impressive here. I actually really like the chamfered ring that surrounds the glass lens. We also have a dual-tone LED flash. Now the camera is pretty impressive. This is a 12 megapixel sensor with an f2.0 aperture, which records 4K video. Now this camera is actually using the same sensor that's used in the Google Pixel, one of the best cameras on any smartphone today. But of course, there's more to cameras than just sensors. There's image processing, optics, and more. We're going to get into that. So when it comes to our specs, this is pretty mid-range. This has the Snapdragon 625 with the Adreno 506 GPU. That's actually the same setup in the Moto G5 Plus I recently reviewed, but we do get 3 gigs of RAM standard, along with 32 gigs of onboard storage in addition to our micro SD card slot. That's still more than enough horsepower to keep up with the software and to deliver the best battery life possible. And that's thanks to a very large 3505 milliamp hour battery. That's big for a 4.5-inch screen. That's actually a bit bigger than the battery in the Galaxy S8 Plus. So when it comes to battery life, this is one of the best devices I've ever tested. I was able to get 2 full days out of reviewing this phone on a single charge, which to me is really impressive. And that's about 7 hours of on-screen time at maximum brightness, and that's without using any low power modes. Of course, you probably can get better life if you dim the display, but the display isn't terribly bright to begin with, so I think that helps with the battery status. So when it comes to camera quality, this is much better than I expected out of a BlackBerry, especially a mid-range BlackBerry, so to speak. It delivers really sharp images, although it does tend to over-sharpen and overexpose shadows, so it really wants to bring up detail. So you see a lot of detail, but a lot of times it's a little too sharp. But if you get those tight macro shots, you get a nice shallow depth of field and a lot of color detail. So when it comes to 4K video, the first thing that jumps out right away here is that we don't have optical image stabilization, so handheld video does look pretty shaky. But the video itself is extremely crisp and clear, and the other thing that jumps out right away is how vibrant and colorful the video is. This is especially noticeable outdoors with bright sunlight, but it's a fantastic camera despite the shakiness. Although the aperture isn't that big, f2.0, we still get great low light performance. So this looks especially well if you have some sources of light, but if it's pretty dark, you lose a lot of color detail. But the dual tone LED flash is actually very effective. So what does an 8 megapixel front-facing camera on a BlackBerry look like? Well, it could look better. Now this is an early production device, so it looks like they need to tweak this a bit more. It's kind of dark. It's not as good as I expect from most front-facing cameras, especially with these specs. So it records in 1080p video, and if you have enough light, it's just fine. But as you can see, it starts choking with any dark backgrounds or anything like that. So you can see it's frame dropping. So it doesn't look as good as I would like to see, but if you're just taking still photographs, it's still a sharp camera. Next up, let's dig into this interface. So this is Android 7. This is actually the first Android 7.1.1 BlackBerry device I've taken a look at. Now in terms of how this works, Android users are going to be pretty comfortable here, but of course BlackBerry has added quite a few features that make it the unique experience that it is. We're going to go in depth and explore all of those. So in terms of waking it up, of course you can double tap to wake up the lock screen, or as you can see right here, the fingerprint sensor is highlighted with these LED indicators. That lets us know that it's ready to be activated. Just lightly tap, unlocks directly to where you last left off. So let me do that again. So all I have to do on the lock screen, lightly tap, unlocks, very responsive and quick, and I like the location. It's pretty easy to use. Now in terms of that lock screen, of course, there's a few shortcuts to our voice assistant and the camera app, as well as our notifications. Now this keyboard and the Android keys are backlit, and you can actually swipe across up and down to navigate through the interface. So it's a little like a trackpad for your BlackBerry. We've actually seen this for quite a while with BlackBerry, but it's pretty intuitive. I actually like having this right here in a convenient location without having to reach up to touch the screen. Now if you go to an app here, so for example if I go to YouTube, I can scroll using this trackpad, and I find you have to be kind of careful with these Android keys because it's pretty easy to swipe up and hit the home button and leave the app you're in, like I just did right there. So for example, if I go to the app drawer, I can scroll up and down or left and right. Or of course I can just use the screen, and of course using the screen is a bit quicker. The kinetic scrolling is a little faster. Now this last page is set aside for shortcuts. That's a big thing with BlackBerry, quick actions that allow you to speed up your productivity. So you'll see quick actions for composing email or text, add an event, instead of just opening up the app itself. Now if you want to remove these, just tap and hold and take it up to remove. So to manage and edit the home screens, tap and hold to get to the editor, so you can swipe between your pages and rearrange them if you want, or select different pages to be the main home screen. We also have access to our widgets in addition to our apps or shortcuts, so we have one page for everything. BlackBerry has also done something kind of interesting with a recent apps launcher. So you can see we have a tile view instead of the card view we're used to seeing. So everything has sort of been resized, but you can see a full view of all of these suspended apps, which I actually kind of like. Now we have a clear all for closing everything out, or you can hit these X keys to close the app out. So if I want to shut down contacts, I can do that. Now this is Android 7, so we do have side-by-side windowing. So if we tap and hold on an app and drag it to the top of the screen, this activates the side-by-side view. So there we go, we can take a look at our photographs and open up another app just below it. So if we want, we can actually go to the home screen and select something else. So for example, I would like to open up YouTube. So let me go ahead and find the YouTube app under our app drawer. There we go. So I can play a video down below, resize it like so if it supports the scaling, and you can also use it in landscape orientation as well. And of course, with Android 7, we have the Google Voice Assistant, which you can activate by tapping and holding the home key. Another unique BlackBerry feature is the pop-up widget, which is available from apps that have these ellipses underneath them. So for example, with the BlackBerry Hub, if I swipe up on it, it takes me to this pop-up view, which allows me to navigate through my BlackBerry Hub interface. It's limited, it's not the full app, but it gives me quick access to that feature without having to go directly into the app. Also works with other apps as well, such as Chrome, so I can see my bookmarks. And if I go to, let's say, the Google Play Store, I have options I can open up here, so I can see my library, and it just takes me to my app library for the Play Store. If I go to messages here, I have several other widgets I can select from. So again, these are pop-up widgets, and usually you might have several of them you can open up. So it's one way of accessing widgets without having to permanently attach them to your home screen. Now, of course, if you don't want this on at all, you can turn it off. Just go to your home screen settings right here, and you'll see pop-up widgets, which you can toggle off. And once you do that, you can see those ellipses have been removed. We also have a dark and light theme available under settings. So if you go to theme here, light is default, but if you select dark, you can see it darkens parts of the interface, not everything. So for example, the notification shade still isn't dark, neither is the settings panel. But if you go to the app drawer here, you can see the app drawer is dark. So parts of it are dark, but not the entire interface. So I just leave it on the lights theme. Now speaking of the app drawer, you can swipe between our apps, widgets, and shortcuts, and it's scrolling here, so you can scroll through your apps and see all of your recently accessed apps toward the top. We also have a drop down up here that allows us to sort these apps by the default configuration, alphabetical, newest, most used, or classic. Now, if you look along the right side, we have something called the Productivity tab. It's kind of similar to the Edge screen on Samsung phones. It works very similarly, but the content is quite different. This is geared toward aggregating core information like your calendar events, text messages, and that sort of thing. So it's a little like a version of BlackBerry Hub, but BlackBerry Hub is a separate app, which we'll get into. So you can see today's unread messages. You can see any tasks you have due today, or you have quick access to your favorite contacts. Of course, this is highly customizable, so if you jump to settings, this is where you can customize the positioning and location of the productivity tab. So for example, if you prefer it on the left or right, you can select that. You can change the positioning of the tab. You can change the height of the tab, so if you want it to be really tall or really short, or make it completely invisible or just a little lighter. Now, as I mentioned, BlackBerry Hub is still here, but it's now a standalone app. It used to be integrated into the UI of BlackBerry 10. Now, I've always really liked BlackBerry Hub because it integrates a lot of services in one spot. So for example, if you go to the list here, you can see all these services that are plugged into the BlackBerry Hub. My email, my text messaging, even my social media feeds like my Instagram and Twitter. And of course, you can add more. So I have one spot to manage all of this info. So I can quickly reply to messages, delete them, or compose new messages. I can even swipe down here to see my calendar events toward the top. So for example, if I want to delete this, I can select trash and that gets rid of it. And of course, if I want to see just my email, I can go up to the list here and select email. So now I can see my email. Now I can open up the message, reply to it, and more. Now if I go back to the hub here and select compose, I can compose a message for any of these services, again, without having to jump to those specific apps. Now another feature I really like about this keyboard, and something BlackBerry is kind of known for, are these shortcuts that you can apply to these keys. And they do this in a very interesting way. So for example, a short press of the B key on the home screen takes me to Twitter, but a long press will take me to YouTube. Now essentially all of these keys can be assigned to shortcuts, either a short press or a long press. And if you do a long press on the key that hasn't been assigned, they give you this interface for each action. So for example, I can open up an app with a long press of the Z key, or I can open up speed dial or send a message or go to all shortcuts. So I have quite a few shortcuts I can select from, or I can just open up an app. So again, long press, and I can select an app to pick. pick. Now once you assign them, you'll actually have to go to the keyboard shortcuts to manage them. So we have long press and short press. So you can see all the keys that have been assigned or not assigned. So if you have a key assigned, such as the B key here, I can edit this. So I can select a different app or one of the shortcuts. Now I can also manage the keyboard shortcuts under home screen settings, and there's a few things to know about here. So we have our keyboard shortcuts, which again brings us to that interface. So that's where it's located. So the shortcut that's on the home screen actually brings us right here. But we also have something called typing action. Now, by default, it wants us to use the short press shortcut. But instead of that, you can select Start a Search. So that turns off the short press shortcut. So now if I do a short press of the B key, that brings me to search. So a lot of people are familiar with this from previous BlackBerry devices. So I can actually just start searching something. I can just start typing it in. So for example, if I want to search for, I don't know, Android, just start typing it in, and it should bring up the search right away. It's not as fast as I would like to see, but there you go. Now the next thing I want to do here is show you the basics of using this keyboard. Now this keyboard obviously is not on screen, but there's a few things that appear on screen, such as these auto-completion options. Now of course you can tap the screen to select the word, or you can just swipe up on the keyboard where that word appears. So left, right, center, and so forth. We also have Google's voice keyboard. This is a test of Google's voice keyboard on the BlackBerry. It works pretty well, as you would expect. Now, if you're deleting and you swipe really quickly to the left, you can quickly delete one word at a time. Now, of course, we have an Alt key for accessing some of these characters, like our numbers and our punctuation. Now, if you tap and hold on the voice button, this will actually take us to a few other things, such as the emoji keyboard. So this allows us to quickly tap on the categories or just swipe across to find the one we want. Now, this keyboard already has a lot of punctuation and symbols built in, but there's more that isn't there. So if you want to get to those, click the symbol key, and this will take you to 2 pages that you can cycle through. Although it's ideally situated for portrait, of course, we have landscape. So if you go to landscape mode here, of course, we can scroll up and down or side to side. And if you want to input text, you actually get an on-screen keyboard. So if I want to add a new URL here, all I have to do is use this keyboard, and it's pretty familiar. Now, although it's in a different location, we have our convenience key. So if you tap on this, this will launch directly into whatever you have assigned to it. So right now for me, that's the Photos app, but you can assign this under Settings. So if we go to Settings, there's a specific panel just for the convenience key here. So if I go to find it right here, convenience key, you can go ahead and select either an app or one of the shortcuts. So we have lots of apps we can pick from, or all of these shortcuts. So if you want to quickly launch into the phone dialer or something like that, you can do that. So I just want to quickly take a look at the camera app, so you can double press the power key to get to it really quickly. So the camera app is pretty basic, but it does have a few tweaks, which makes it kind of unique. One of them is the exposure control. So I can swipe up and down on the keyboard to adjust exposure manually, which is actually very nice. In terms of using the camera to snap a photograph or use the space bar to snap a photograph, tap and hold to take a burst shot. You'll see the counter up top, and it's pretty quick. Of course, we have our mode selector, and our modes include panorama as well as video and slow motion. In terms of video, if we go to the video mode here, you can see that we can snap photographs at the same time while having the option to record video. So if you're in photo mode, you actually have to switch to video mode to start recording video. So generally speaking, I like to stay in video mode so I have quick access to both of these things. Ultimately, I think the best way to sum up the BlackBerry KEYone is that it's a back-to-basics approach. BlackBerry has finally created a device that should please the BlackBerry faithful, instead of creating something that's a little strange, like the wide BlackBerry Passport or the sliding BlackBerry Priv. I think it's the perfect form factor, with many of the features expected from modern smartphones in a classic BlackBerry design. Now, this phone is still priced under $600, so it's not quite as powerful as the flagship smartphones out there, and the camera could use a few more features. And when it comes to typing on the physical keyboard, I definitely see the appeal because it's much more reliable and quick, and after a while you don't have to look at the keys while you're typing. Now, this probably won't convince Samsung or iPhone users to switch over to a BlackBerry, but this certainly gives those BlackBerry users or people who are forced to use BlackBerries a really good option to use. Alrighty guys, hope you enjoyed this look at the BlackBerry KEYone. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up to let me know, and I'll see you again in my next video.